psychedelic.
Yeah, I think you found it. You could probably back that way down.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, hello, hello.
Live at 5.
Is it time to go? Hello, everybody. I am so excited to see you all here.
Me too.
And I think that the thing that happens with me is that I fell in love with Canal Street to the point where when I left, I had to stay away for a while. I had to separate myself from that because I couldn't walk into the club without going, wait a minute, why do you have the chair set up like this? This sucks. What's the deal here? Or, that glass does not look clean to me. Somebody needs to be washing these glasses right now, man. So, and that's not how I want it to be. I want to open up with telling you this. I am 67 years old. The reason I'm telling you my age is that because I have known Mick Montgomery for 62 years. And he doesn't remember this. I told him this story once, and he went, here's my impression of Mick Montgomery. You ready? Well, Sharon, I don't remember that. Okay. And he didn't remember it, and I didn't expect him to, but it was a monumental thing for me. And without going through like all the crap your parents do to you, that leaves you like totally devastated for the rest of, no, I'm okay. Anyway, Mick and I went to grade school together. We went to elementary school together. He was in the 3rd grade, and I was in kindergarten when I met Michael Montgomery. And how I met him is that I had fallen off the jungle gym. I often wonder why he was even over in that area. And I think it's because I might have been hanging upside down with a dress on. But I fell off the jungle gym, and I really buggered my knee up really bad. And I was just standing there kind of crying and just standing there. And he came over, and he said, "You need to go see your teacher." And he took me right through the door, and he put me in there in front of my teacher, and he left. And he was the big boy that saved my life. Yeah. And so as years went on, we were supposed to go to high school together, but we didn't wind up going to high school together because my dad became a Trotwood cop. And, oh, man, that's a whole different lifetime story there. But I wound up going to a different high school, but I always kept, and I always wanted to know what he was up to. Always, would find out what he's doing and where he's going with whatever it was. And I think sometimes when you meet people that have a magic about them, for some reason, whatever it is, that, and with me it was the magic that somebody gave a damn that I buggered my knee and took me into my teacher, and I got a really cool Band-Aid out of it. And the thing is that meant a lot to me, because that care, just having somebody care for you, was not present in my life right then. And so for him to do that, well, as years go by, and I don't have the greatest memory. I forget names and dates, but someone said, "Hey, man, you know what Mick Montgomery's doing?" "No, what's Mick Montgomery doing?" Well, it took me a year to figure out who Mick was, because I didn't know him by Mick Montgomery. And, no, what's going on? Man, there's this place. And I was like the rock and roll girl at that time, so I wasn't doing folk music. I wasn't doing any of, I was listening to everything, but I wasn't doing it. I was doing rock and roll then. And I knew Mick from the Lemon Tree. I knew Mick because I was that person that would go into Sam's and just stand in the corner and listen for an hour or two and then slip out. So I knew a lot of these performers before they ever knew me. And said, "You need to go down here, man. Mick Montgomery bought this place. It's going to be cool as hell." And I said, "Well, let's go." And we did, and all kinds. Pete Bradstreet's ripping wires out, and stuff is corrugated cardboard is flying, and All you needed to do was talk to Mick about music for one moment, and you understood what his dream was all about, and you understood his heart when it came to music. Because I've always said, say what you want about any of us. Say what you want. Mick Montgomery could put a show together that would kick your ass in a second flat and not think nothing of it. Now I'm going to do a Mick Montgomery impression again. He would walk out and he would go, "Hey, Sharon, you won't believe who I just talked to on the phone." And then he would say, "Yeah, they're going to come here and play." And it would be anywhere. Fill in the missing blank. Leon Redbone. Whomever it was at the time that he was. But then he would say something like, so just fill in the blank. Put somebody you saw there here. Okay? And then he would say, and guess who I got to open for him? And then he would say, so-and-so. And I'd go, okay. And he would walk away. And I swear I'd be going, really? Mick, you think this is a good thing? Really? And every single time the show would happen, and it was just kick ass. And it was fun. I can remember dancing on the bar. Matter of fact, I can remember dancing on the bar with a lot of different people. And so pretty soon Mick says, not too long after the club opened, Mick says, Sharon, I think you could do the co-op. I think you could host the co-op. And he came to me and he asked me to do that. And I thought to myself, yeah, you know what? This is pretty cool. I'm no longer doing rock and roll music. I'm sitting at a piano. This would be a good thing for me to hone my craft. This would be a good thing to meet other musicians. This is cool. And yeah, I'll do it. Maybe I'll do it for about a year. And I hosted the co-op for about 8.5 years every Tuesday. Yes. And out of those co-ops, just putting people on stage and giving them a forum to just do what they do. Now, I'm going to say this, I did have a guy one time that dressed up like a rabbit and danced to disco music. So I'm not saying every Tuesday, every act, it could be different. But for Mixed Dream was this. Mixed Dream was if you had a talent and you were a musician, here's the stage, and you get the same damn stage that all of these other musicians get, whether it be Jesse Winchester or whether it be whomever it was. You get to use that same Donovan. I can tell you a story about Donovan. He helped me clean the tables that day. Anyway, he gave you a forum to be who you were, hone your craft, using the same sound man that just ran sound for all these national acts. You were important. Whether you were playing in your damn living room or your bedroom, it didn't matter. Come play here because you have a space. You have a place. And so then pretty soon, I was working the bar, and pretty soon Mick asked me to help manage the place, and it grew into that. It's like, okay, Mick, we can do this. I'll buy the cherries and you get the music. And this is going to be a cool-ass situation, man. And so on from there, I got to meet these two gentlemen as well as, throughout the years, most of you,
We're all going to talk and then give Mick a rebuttal period. I'm on stage with 3 of the best storytellers I've ever known in my life, so I prepared something. I don't like to be unprepared, so I wrote a little something the other day. I don't know. I'm getting to the age where I'm not sure if the glasses help or hurt.
You have to do this.
Yeah. All right. There was a fist-sized dent in the dressing room wall at Canal Street Tavern. I put it there. Said dent was just to the left of the closet that served as a liquor stockroom, which is a whole other story unto itself. There was a little room full of booze hidden in the band's dressing room. I wonder how many musicians knew about the alcoholic Valhalla just a few feet from them. just one easily picked lock away. But I digress. Back to the dent. I honestly don't remember the details of the night in question. I played that room literally over 1,000 times in dozens of different bands and solo sets. God, more solo sets than I could possibly hope to count. All I remember is that in the flood of adrenaline I was usually caught up in after a show, I stormed into that room full of frustration with what I considered a lackluster performance and let her rip. I was lucky I didn't break my hand. Why did I do it? It's certainly not something I made a habit of. It's kind of ironic, but I think the reason I did such a destructive, petulant, stupid thing boils down to one reason: respect. A little background first. I grew up north of Dayton, out in the nether regions of Miami County. There may have been an all-ages music scene in my neck of the woods as the 80s turned into the 90s, but if there was, I sure as hell didn't know about it. I had nothing but a handful of bizarre, under-attended gigs under my belt. High school dances, community festivals, a basement party, stuff like that. Then, in the summer of 1991, one of my bandmates caught wind of something called the Dayton Band Playoffs. A gig in the big city. And all we had to do was pay a registration fee. We coughed up the dough, and we prepared for the big time. It doesn't really matter that we got our small-town asses handed to us by the up-and-coming hometown heroes in the first round. We got to play Canal Street Tavern, an honest-to-God music club. The first person who greeted us as we loaded in was Sharon Lane, who was working there that night. She could not have been nicer to us, and our guitarist and I were both blown away that she was the first person either of us had ever met who had actually seen Jimi Hendrix in concert. In fact, everybody there made us feel at home.
He was supposed to marry me.
In fact, everyone there made us feel at home. I became an instant fan of the place. A few years and a few bands later, I started playing there regularly, eventually moving to Dayton and hanging out there as often as I could. It really goes without saying that I learned how to be a musician at Canal Street, taking mental notes and soaking in the performances of the masters who swung through town on tour, and learning what worked and what didn't work the hard way, the right way, the good way, on stage in front of a room full of people. If Jamy Holiday said, "Good set," when I headed back to the bar after playing, I took it to heart because he had no reason to sugarcoat. If Mick Montgomery said it was a good set, that was enough to make me levitate home. It was a room full of sincerity, owned and staffed by music lovers, the true believers. Canal Street was like church to me. Canal taught me how to be a musician for sure, but I also learned how to be a person there, really. I was a pretty naive 21-year-old when I first played there. The friendships I made there over the years, the experiences I had in that room, did as much to shape who I am as anywhere or anybody else ever did. I fell in love there numerous times. I fell out of love there just as many times. I attended weddings there. I attended wakes there. I saw fistfights, meltdowns, heart attacks, ghosts, bats, all manner of debauchery after hours. I hosted 4 years' worth of Tuesday night musicians co-ops. I cleaned the toilets, I glazed windows, released a dozen or so albums there. I've sold the place out and taken days to come back down to earth afterward. I've had transcendent musical moments in front of 4 paying customers, and I've been one of those 4 to witness countless more similar moments for others. I hosted the co-op right after Tim Taylor died, and I remember the incredibly heavy gloom and sadness that hung over the room. My band was the last one to play the stage when Mick sold the place. An incredible, unbelievable honor. I had some of the best and worst nights of my life in that room. Lots of others did too. If a customer started giving the door person static, there would instantly be half a dozen regulars on hand as backup. The place just inspired a loyalty that other bars could only hope to engender. Which brings me back to the dent in the dressing room wall. I punched that wall because I loved and respected the place so much. I wanted to do right by the joint when I played there, to represent in the best way I could, to try and live up to the reputation and all the magic moments it played host to. It's a weird way to show it, I know, but there it is. It was home. Sorry about the hole, Mick. but I'm not sorry about why I made it. God bless you, and long live Canal Street Tavern.
Exactly. Exactly. The dent was perfectly perfect. It was
Thank you.
the perfect thing to do. So I got in here this evening, and I'm Jamie. Leaned in to say hey to Mick, whose house I was at last night to do a little carpentry work for, because that's what you do when you get old. And he drafted me for this thing, this seat I'm in right now, so I'm unscripted.
Hey, man, it would really be cool if you were up there with us.
Unfucking believable, man. You know? So, I'll say this. Mick and I were talking just last night, and Todd, you mentioned the words loyalty and firsts and lasts. And Mick and I were just talking last night about that word loyalty, and it came up a lot, you know. I remember, and I'll try not to ramble too much because, you know, thanks to Sharon Lane teaching me how to drink Jack Daniels properly,
It's her fault.
well versed in being able to ramble on for days, but that's also part of the Canal Street situation. You can probably back this mic down a little bit because, yeah, perfect. Thank you, sir. My lemon drop is probably what's sending it over. I remember one time a Brazilian years ago. I worked at Canal Street for about 13 years, and Mick and I were talking last night. I retired from Canal Street with my aluminum watch with one hand on it 17 years ago. So that makes me like 29. And it's hard to believe, but it's true. It's been that long. And, you know, I remember one night somebody came in the bar and didn't realize that I could hear them sitting at the bar bitching about the bar as they were being served and treated with respect and welcomed warmly by everybody, even the new guy at the door who, that's where I started. I think wasn't old enough to be in the bar, actually.
Shh, don't tell that part.
Redacted.
Yeah, just strike that. And this person was complaining about Canal Street, and they said, you know, I've seen a few cool shows here and some cool bands, but they have a real treehouse mentality here, and it's really not cool. We're just not cool enough to be part of the team. And I thought, go fuck yourself. You know, yeah, we do have a treehouse mentality here, and the treehouse is fucking giant.
Yes.
It's the size of the city of Dayton and shaped like a big blob like the city of Dayton. You know, anybody who could have been in that bar and thought that they weren't cool enough to be in the bar probably wasn't. It's just that simple. You know, Mick hired me as a result. Gary Thompson spoke earlier about being the sound guy, and he said he watched Pete Bradstreet, and so he figured it out. Well, I got hired by Mick when I was in the neighborhood of not old enough to drink. And because a friend of mine, Chris Heckman, was the sound engineer at the time, and he brought me in and introduced me to Mick and Sharon, and I was just, you know, over the moon, like, holy shit, I remember when I couldn't get in here, even though the door guy, Skyp Krantz, was asleep at the door. God love you. I walked in to see Toxic Reasons, punk rock from Dayton, Ohio. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
I was thinking Mark Patterson, who's here or was, but
Yep.
you know, Ed, yes. I came in to see Toxic Reasons when I was even younger than too young to be in the bar, and Skip was asleep, and still somehow his Pontiac was parked out front, and somehow he perked up just in time to say, no, you're not old enough to get in here. You have to have an ID. Son of a bitch, really? It's Toxic Reasons. Wearing patent leather Doc Marten combat boots, a 14-inch mohawk, possibly biking shorts,
Yeah.
on a Red Allen show. And so here come the faithful in to see Red and everything that he and his family did. And the first person they see when they walk in the door that they were a little worried about coming into anyway because it was downtown, really, really far from Kentucky, downtown. And after that, you know, staring competition as they went, as the door opened, and in they come and see my skinny ass, looking at them like, oh, shit. And they're looking at me like, oh, shit. Within seconds, they're at the door. They're paying their cash, which was probably not enough anyway. And then they went. 80 Brazilian years later, after Sharon taught me how to drink Jack Daniels and do things the Canal Street way, I started out at the door, got a promotion to Tuesday night sound engineer. And Katie, I believe you mentioned that co-op was sort of the training grounds, and you got to do it too.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was how you got your feet wet at Canal Street. You did what you did at the co-op.
As an employee and a performer. Basically.
Katie
totally,
started
yeah.
smoking at Canal Street.
and cursing.
And cursing.
And cursing.
Katie said fuck for the first time at Canal Street.
I believe I was there, yeah. And it's still funny when it comes out of her mouth.
I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I got to tell you something. He's behind the bar one night, and Katie comes in, and she stands at the end of the bar, and she's all dignified. And she pulls out a cigarette, and she puts it in her mouth, and she lights it. I look at Jamy. Jamy looks at me. We're like, oh, my God. And she goes, I know it, and if I want to fucking smoke, I will fucking smoke. And I turned around and I said, Daddy, look, our baby's smoking.
What have we done?
And cussing, yeah. And
She said
Whose
the
fault?
big F word.
Yep. So years later, Sharon's ready to retire.
I was?
You were going to retire. I don't know if you were ready.
No,
But you needed to.
School. I need to go to school, didn't I?
You need to get growed up.
Yeah.
Well, unbeknownst to Mick, Sharon was really going to leave. She'd probably threatened several times in the heat of a discrepancy over lemons or limes or some shit we were out of again. Or the cooler not working, or almost falling through that hole in the floor behind the bar that we had 30 years of cardboard boxes jammed under, so we didn't fall through to the basement.
I did that.
So she says, Jamy, I think you're up. I think you're going to take over being the manager and running the joint for Mick. And I looked at her and I said, okay. She said, well, we can't tell Mick, but I'm going to teach you what you need to know. Now, mind you, I'd been the doorman, the resident gap-tooth haver, the shittiest sound guy ever.
No, you weren't.
And bam, now I'm going to run the joint for Mick. Well, you don't say no, you know. It's a time-honored tradition. You just do what you're supposed to do next, and you do it Mick's way, and it works. So with a little subterfuge, I would sneak in there and learn Tenon Bar from Sharon. We knew Mick wouldn't be in before 11 or so, 12 sometimes. So we had plenty of time. Nobody ratted us out, as I'm aware anyway. And at one point in time, we sort of figured that I knew how to make a few drinks, and I knew exactly what you weren't allowed to do at Canal Street. And that was really the most important thing, other than don't take any shit unless it's from Rory Block, in which case, shut up and do it.
I said to Jamy when he was going to start bartending, and I said, Jamy, you're going to have some people that get pissed off about like their drink, or they're going to think blah, blah, blah. And here's your standard answer when they say, well, I'll leave. You go, okay. And they say, this is not a good drink. Okay. And when they say more liquor in it, you say, no problem. You put your thumb over the end and you go like this and give it back to them, and they're happy.
Exactly. Exactly. So I'll wrap up because I'm rambling, and I've got a really great Pierre but Suzanne story. Monica Snow mentioned Pierre earlier, which was really good. I think Angie was there that night at Nick's Hideaway Cafe for food for Pierre. He didn't care for the chicken sandwich there, but when Sharon told Mick, "Hey, I'm finally gonna leave," Mick just looked, and it's the only time I ever saw Mick look surprised, like, what do you mean? And she said, "Mick, I'm leaving. I gotta go." And he says, "You can't leave. What am I gonna do?" And she said, "Hey, I got you." He said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Jamie's gonna take over." Mick looked at me, almost like the Red Allen fans, first night, almost. Much less disdain, but that same puzzlement, like, what the fuck, really? And he looked back at Sharon, and he looked back at me, and he said, "Okay, man." And there was the beginning of probably the best part of my life to this day. So,
Mine too.
thank you guys for supporting what this gentleman created.
We'd like to give Mick his rebuttal moment for all of the accusations we have leveled at him all night. But we wanted to also open it up for questions if anybody have any questions after Mick gets his rebuttal, I guess. Yeah. Oh.
Could you piss in that sink, sir?
Exactly.
Exactly.
I really have a good story about that. That was my idea, and it was early on. And after about the third time, when I used to refer to them as jocks, smashed the sink, we made sure it was high enough that they couldn't do that. And they'll never piss in it again either.
And if you could piss in that sink?
I really wanted to talk about something that, in working on this book, it's absolutely been a pleasure. It's what's keeping me going. I can't, in words, tell you what it means to hear these stories and remember what was happening then. It's not like you remember things linearly, you know. And so when somebody tells a story, I kind of get this picture of who all worked there at that time, what kind of acts were really doing well, and it's been entirely a pleasure to have these reminiscences. And it's very important to me. These three people right here were so immensely instrumental in making all these wonderful things you're saying about Mick Montgomery. I could never have done that without an incredible cast over the years. From day one, we had people that worked there that amazing. They gave a shit. They got it. They came in. It was never, we never had very many people that came in and fought over tips. No. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about money for me. I mean, you know, anybody can run the joint down the street that has the best jukebox and shakes as much money out of people's pockets as they can and then kicks them out drunk. I hate places like that. That's why I like this place.
Yes. Yep.
And the truth is, when I first started Canal Street, my biggest fear was that there just wasn't enough people in Dayton that even would understand what a listening room was.
Right.
And being an old singer-songwriter, those were the kind of things that meant a lot to me. I wanted to sit down, relax, and hear the lyrics. And there wasn't any place in the whole Midwest. You should hear how the agents used to talk to me like they were in disbelief. How can this idiot keep this club going in Dayton, Ohio? And not only that, they would continually help me by bringing me people like Mary Chapin Carpenter, who was just on the verge. And
Los Lobos.
you know, in Los Lobos, by the time Los Lobos got to Canal Street, they had already had a record or a single that had charted, and La Bamba just came out. And you know, these are things that don't just happen. Some of the agents that I dealt with were hilarious. I would go to like South by Southwest or some of these conferences and get to meet some of these guys, and you have this picture of them being like Fast Eddie, and you go and you meet them, and they're kind of just like you know, and they just love music, and they're doing it because most of them because they want to get rich, but that's the other thing. They can't believe that someone would be working his ass off, like all of us did, for low pay. I mean, it was
low.
never a place. And you know, I mean, Sharon talks about how long she worked there, Jamy. Tod didn't even mention how many years he did the co-op.
Yeah.
Not as many as Sharon, but
No, but you did a long
I did my
time.
tour of duty. I did
Yeah.
4.
And the truth is, that co-op job, that was not making any money that
No.
night he came
No,
in.
I've been meaning to talk to you about that.
Checks in the mail.
And you know, all the years I did it at Sam's, I felt like I was really doing this cool thing.
You were.
And it was a volunteer thing. And I remember talking Mike Zunis, the guy that owned Sam's, into buying a PA. And when he bought the PA, he comes in and he sits it in his office and he says, "There's your PA." Never, ever thought about having a sound man. That became me. And I remember I thought it was important to go up on stage and introduce the people that were playing. The point of it was to respect these local songwriters who frankly were amazing.
Yes.
And to make sure that they knew that they were respected, at least in one place in town. And that whole ethos came from Sam's originally. And
Yeah.
And how many musicians in here who have done some traveling? How many other places have you played where you were introduced every time you played? It never happens anywhere else.
Welcome to the stage.
Exactly.
Well,
Mick did that for every time to everybody.
well, you know, another thing about that, I love to go up and say, "This is so and so. He's from out in Inglewood, and he does blues."
stuff.
You know,
Yeah.
and when I lived in Los Angeles, a very big feather in my cap was standing in line to be able to play at their open stage at the Troubadour.
Wow.
The Troubadour was one of the, you know,
Yeah.
big houses in Los Angeles. And actually, I played there twice. Both times, what's his name with the bow and arrow? through
Steve
the-
Martin.
Steve Martin.
Steve Martin was on the bill both nights that I played. And I go up and my knees are shaking, and this guy who had a cowboy hat on comes out, and he's real laid back, and he tells all these people, here's this new songwriter in town from the Midwest, and he was like that, and it felt like he was paying respect to some kid that just happened to have his guitar when he went west, you know. And the truth is, I got a lot from playing at places where they gave you no respect. I remember playing in bars that were packed, and it was almost like if you could engage a dozen people in the crowd, you had a great night. And everybody else was playing pinball, watching sports, ordering a pizza. And I just, that was one of the motivations for opening Canal Street. That's just, there's too much respect not given to people who deserve it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I see Jeff Opt over here trying to create that kind of a vibe,
Yeah.
Jeff understands that.
Well, he was a Canal Street baby.
And by the way, Jeff, you're ready for the sound guy job on the co-op.
Ready.
I've been saying to everybody who will listen to me for a while now that Jeff and Mark and Tara have created a place here that is worthy of the torch
Absolutely.
of Canal Street
Absolutely.
Tavern. So if you guys have enjoyed it tonight, please keep coming back and support this place, just like you did at Canal Street
Absolutely.
Tavern. So.
And by the same token, I remember coming in here when you were first putting things together, and I'm thinking, I remember when Jeff Opt used to have to come to Canal Street with his mom and dad. And I got to know your mom and dad pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I know your mom and dad were really bluegrass aficionados, and they were really understood good music when they heard it. Doesn't matter what genre it is. I used to say that all the time. Somebody says, well, man, why don't you just have more blues, or why don't you have more this or that? And the only answer is, I'm in Dayton, Ohio, and there is a pocket full of people that like this and this and this. And I've got to make sure that they understand the reason why they like what they like can apply to all other genres. If they happen to wander in here and see a Zydeco band, and they've never ever even heard of a Zydeco band before, it works.
Yeah,
It works. And suddenly, people start being a little more adventurous. And they come in and they see something just because I yanked them when they left the last time and said, you got to come see these guys. You know?
That was so many times.
And he did.
Yeah.
How-
I was
how-
talking to Nick Kazernis earlier tonight, similar to something like when I first came to Canal Street as a 21-year-old, it was like I was looking at the world of music through the binoculars backwards, how everything is like narrow and really far away. And then suddenly, within 3 years of hanging out at Canal Street, it was Cinerama.
Yes. Yes.
And it was, yeah, and Mick would constantly say, you got to come in, man, you got to come in and check these guys out.
Just
yeah.
curious. out of all the folks that are here right now, how many did I buttonhole when they were there? And
You know, it's true. I was, I was talking about working the door when Red Allen played, and so many different people. You know, I was a young punk rock kid, and I was motivated by a lot of local people. Because one of the things that I liked about punk rock, which is exactly the same ethos as folk music was, which was the only difference between the guy on the stage and the guy in the crowd is that the guy on the stage has a guitar in his hand or whatever instrument. You get to be the same guy. So if you're a jackass in the audience, you're probably going to be a jackass on stage. So figure it out real quick, right? But when I came up and discovered punk rock music, one of the unfortunate byproducts of it was you become very tribal, and so you get rid of your Rolling Stones and AC/DC. Okay, I didn't get rid of the Stones records, but you get rid of those records because you're only going to like this one thing. And when I came into Canal Street under Mick and Sharon, that's where I was. Those same binoculars in reverse, different bands, but the same thing. And within a few years to this day, fucking Paul Jeremiah.
I was going to say that. I remember you hitting me to, yeah.
Paul Jeremiah, you know, I've done a few acoustic shows, and they were not good.
they were good.
But all I can ever think of when I sit down with a guitar in a chair is Paul Jeremiah. And for those of you that know who Paul Jeremiah is, I don't need to say anymore. And for those of you that don't, go find him.
Yeah.
This, you know, bam, Canal Street Tavern was there under your tutelage, and all of the shit that you learned and said, I don't want to do this, and I do want to do this. Everyone, we all did that. That was what you taught us to do. And I became a fan of bluegrass, and I became a fan of you know, the most unpunk rock thing could be is this sort of portly guy with this Wilford Brimley looking face named Paul Jeremiah sitting down with a guitar and a glass of whiskey and just fucking laying it out. One man playing the blues, and it's like you just fell off the planet and discovered the whole. What just happened to me? It was like that potentially every night for somebody at Canal Street, because that's the whole point, right?
Yeah. When Mick says that it wasn't a money thing, I can think right away one time. He says to me, he goes, Sharon, I'm going to bring in the Hammer Dolls, Malcolm Douglas. Do you know who he is? Well, he says, I'm going to have him come in. And I'm like, okay, who is that? And then there's that Mick thing, like, you don't know who that is? Are you kidding me? Kind of thing. So he brings him in, and he looked at me square in the eye, and he goes, you know, Sharon, I'm going to probably lose a lot of money on this show.
I heard that a lot.
And I said, okay, but he said, but you know what? He said, he's so good, and people in this city need to hear him, whether it's 5 people or 10 people, or if we're lucky, 20. Because he needs to be paid, and people need to know who that is. So that's what Mick did with music. He was willing to say, this needs to be done, and I'm not going to make a damn dime. I'm going to lose money. I'm going to have to go to the bank before the end of the night and pull money out to pay this guy. But you know what? We need to have him in the city of Dayton. Who said something about Pierre Ben Suzanne?
That was Monica's.
Monica, were you there his first show when he whipped out a joint and lit it on stage? And people went, you can't do that here. And he was like, really? He just couldn't believe what? You know?
This is a fish sandwich.
It's a chicken sandwich, yeah. He couldn't believe it.
What? No, you can't do that here. You got to put that out. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Was it Pierre that left his guitar there?
Yeah,
For what, a year?
a year.
It was in the kitchen, and he couldn't believe it. It was there when he
At
came
least
back,
Yeah.
sitting in the case where he
left it.
Where he left it. We knew it was his. He couldn't believe it.
Things like that happened a lot, actually. Usually,
Probably your fault that he forgot his guitar, but At least it was us there watching his guitar.
I remember telling band members who were from out of town that Canal Street was originally a major stop on the Underground Railroad. And I'd be very serious, and I would, Paul Butterfield, the blues guy, I took him down in the basement.
There was a time I wanted to start growing mushrooms down there, you guys.
And I took him over where the floor was earth, and I said, there used to be train tracks that went right through here. and Paul Butterfield looked at me and he says, really? Yep, follow the drinking gourd, folks.
You punked Paul Butterfield.
I think, though, the thing that I wanted to really put a lot of emphasis on, because I have the chance to right now, is it's partly about what I said before about not always being oriented just towards the bottom line. And the only way that possibly can happen is if you really have a whole crew who get that idea and run with it and are very proud of themselves for feeling that way, for thinking that, we're really the underground here. We're really the avant-garde. This is what it's all about. We're starving artists. So I'm just amazed by this night. I am so humbled, and I so appreciate every one of you for coming. Thank you. Thank you, Shelley, you throw a hell of a party.
Love you. We're going to close the night with a very familiar poem Tod is going to read for you. You're going to know it 2 words in, and if you know it by heart, say it with him.
You might have seen this somewhere. I hate a song that makes you think you are not any good. I hate a song that makes you think that you were just born to lose, bound to lose, no good to nobody, no good for nothing, because you are too old or too young or too fat or too slim, too ugly or too this or too that. Songs that run you down or poke fun at you on account of your bad luck or hard traveling. I'm out to fight those songs to my very last breath of air and my very last drop of blood. I am out to sing songs that will prove to you that this is your world, and that if it hits you pretty hard and knocked you for a dozen loops, no matter what color, what size you are, how you are built, I am out to sing the songs that make you take pride in yourself and in your work. And the songs that I sing are made up, for the most part, by all sorts of folks just about like you. Woody Guthrie said that.
Skip wanted to, somebody was talking about him. He has a rebuttal here.
Sorry to throw you under the bus, Skip.
I've been there before. I was podcasted a little bit ago, so you'll hear that later. But a couple things I didn't tell them. I just got a couple funny stories that happened to me when I was working the door. One was, which should I tell first? It was Garnet Rogers. I'll start with that one. I'm pretty sure it was Garnet Rogers was playing that night. And at the time, I was regularly driving my 57 Pontiac, and Mick was driving his 56 Chevy, and they were both parked in front of the door on the curb that night. Looking good. And we were outside for some reason. He was fetching something, and on the way back, he said, we talked about it. I told him that they were mine and Mick's. And he said to me something to the effect of, "You guys can't afford modern cars?"
That sounds like Garnet.
And there was one night I was working the Dayton the band playoffs, and this alternative kind of band, I don't know who it was, but they were doing their cover of Pretty Woman, Van Halen way. And it turns out one of the members of the band was the son of newspaper writer D.L. Stewart, remember him? And he was standing there by the door stand with me, and he just kind of leaned over and said, "You guys are really good. I didn't know they could play I didn't know they would do so well with Van Halen stuff." And I reminded him that Van Halen covered Roy Orbison's version, and it was news to him. So, just wanted to relate that. Hopefully that'll be in the book. Skip Krantz. Dr. K.
You know,
Doctor of Rock and Roll. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
when I bought a 1949 Ford two-door sedan that was pinkish purple, I was so stoked to be able to park it out front where
Yeah.
the Chieftain and the Bel Air used to park.
Yeah.
Well, when I bought my 1963 Oldsmobile, I was so stoked that it would make it to the Canal Street Tavern.
Well,
I was like, one more time, baby, let's do it.
that reminds me, since you mentioned that, and Judd
Emergency.
Yeltsin,
I don't know how to turn my
I forget what year it was, but the Jitters were being managed by Judd Yeltsin. And we had Louis Lerma playing upright bass, and Adam Comart, or Adam Up, on lead vocals, and me and Ed Dwyer. Did anybody remember Ed Dwyer?
Yeah.
He was actually on a couple of GBV albums, but he was uncredited, I believe. But he was our lead guitar player. And Judd set us up with a tour. First, it was in April. It was Canal Street Tavern, and I forget I think we played with somebody else. And then Aunt Maudie's in Cincinnati and Clifton. And the third one was a jockey club with a band called The Lucky Strikes, which I
The
thought
Jockey Club was a horrible place to be.
Well, he booked us
Jockey
there.
Club ruled.
And we drove there. We didn't have transportation. And who remembers Jerry Moody? He used to work at the
yeah.
submarine shop.
Yeah.
He had a 63 or 4 red Cadillac ambulance, and we had to borrow that to go on this tour. And it broke down in Cincinnati.
It's probably still in Cincinnati.
Well, the only thing I want to say before I get off this stage is this. Mick Montgomery turned me on to Tom Waits.
Victoria Spivey.
Yeah, and Victoria, yes. But he changed my whole life when he turned me on to what I thought at that time would be my future husband.
So
And
many
he
future
said-
husbands.
And he said, "You don't know who Tom Waits is." I got that one. I'm like, "No." And he went, "Oh, Sharon, you have to listen to this guy. You're really going to like him." And I did, and I fell in love with him. But Mick turned me on to a lot of music that way. And I can remember thinking that, oh my God, this Canal Street goes 24/7 except for one day. And it would be like a sold out show every night. And I'd be like, what? And all of those people from Riders in the Sky, when Mick would say, "Hey Sharon, let's get a bunch of root beer in here and have a bunch of little cowboys and cowgirls. You want to?" and have an afternoon show with little kids running around being cowboys and cowgirls, drinking soda pop and eating Cracker Jacks. And then doing the adult show that night. I want to leave it with this. I have a great admiration for what I learned from his dream. And what I learned was that it doesn't matter if it's bluegrass or punk or whatever. We play the same damn 12 notes. I learned that. I became aware of that at Canal Street. Like, okay, that was dumb. What was I thinking? Mick turned me on to a lot of incredible musicians. He turned me on to different genres of music that I was like, what is this? I'll never, Klezmer, he said, hey, we're going to, and I'm like, what the hell is that? And he said, oh, you're going to love it. You know, and I always did. Know this, you can't have a good club unless you have, Mick talked so fondly of us and the staff. We had great wait staff always and people who really cared and who, I'll tell you what, we would beat the hell out of you over Canal Street. I can remember one time one of our young guy came in and said something real bad about our club. I met him outside. And I just want you to know that you know, part of loving something is knowing about it. And Mick, the educator in Mick, was always that person who said, listen, you know, that grabbed you and said, you need to hear this band, you need to hear this music. And he always gave us, all of us that you see right here, I would not, the first time I played out as a solo musician behind a piano was because of him. He said, oh, no, you got to do this. And I went, well, I don't know if I'm ready. Oh, yeah, you are. You got to. How will you know, Sharon, if you're ready, if you don't put yourself out there? That's right. And Mick Montgomery did that for me, and Canal Street was just, you know, a place for me to hone. You know, if I wrote a new song, I was going to do it on a Tuesday night in front of everybody. You know, that's how it was going to become solid. And I think all of us can say that at one point or another. So we appreciate, but you can't have that if you don't have you guys. We always had a great audience. And the audiences that would come for different, we knew certain people we'd see only on bluegrass or folk, certain people on this. But when they came in, they were like, hey, you know, somebody's outside, they're not doing right, you want me to handle it? They took care of each other. And they stopped the crap before it happened 90% of the time. Oh, when we would have something like a little argument or something come down, we were really excited to throw somebody out. Oh, yeah. We'd be like, oh my God. And so one night, Mick comes up, he comes in late, and I'm standing outside. I was so embarrassed, I wanted to. And I'm taking someone out. And I'm telling them, you can't be here anymore. And so I'm out front, and I say, I don't see Mick walking up. Wouldn't have mattered, because I was going to do it just that way anyhow. And I said, and you stay the hell out of my damn bar. Don't come back. And Mick walks up and hears that, and I go, his bar too.
Well, you know, that's the thing, Sharon, is, and Mick, you and I were talking about this last night. It's like when you're in a band and you say, my drummer or my guitarist or my saxophone player. You take ownership of something that you're proud of. And it's not because you're trying to take credit or take the limelight from somebody else. It's because you are so fucking proud to be part of something that is genuine. That you have to own it, because if you don't own it, it doesn't exist.
I gotta tell this one. A big, probably the most vivid image that I probably have of Jamy over the years behind the bar. Occasionally, somebody would mess with one of our waitresses.
Yeah, buddy.
Oh, yeah. Jamie's, boom, he jumps clear over the bar. I mean, one leap, you know, more powerful than a locomotive. And he's on that person, get the hell out of here.
No.
That was, we were a little ahead of the curve on this messing with women, you know.
Yeah. Well, you know, we were a little bit. I will confess, I don't cotton to men screwing around with women in that way. And Sue mentioned something earlier about the women's series. And Mick, you and I were talking about the women's series last night. You know, I remember being young and working at Canal Street when the women's series was happening. And now it's 2017, and people are kind of starting to realize that it doesn't matter what flavor you are and how tall or short or who you love. You're all people. Shit.
People,
Come on. Give me a break. It's what, 6 days? No, that was something that just did not happen
We
You
didn't
know,
care
we
who you were.
were-
We just wanted you to come in and listen.
I mean, I took pride in that as much as I took
Me
pride
too.
in seeing bands that that were my thing, because I
And-
knew we were doing something that said, I mean, for Christ's sakes, Mickey hired me. I look like like some sort of like one of those little pencil trolls. You go like this and the hair goes, whoosh, you know? I was about as big around then before I gained all this weight. But that was the thing. I mean, you gave that place and said, yeah, we're doing this thing. Why don't you do your thing here? We're going to create a safe place for this to happen, whatever it is. So don't fuck with it.
Yes.
And when somebody did, I went over the bar and acted like a jackass.
I remember taking the same attitude that
Absolutely.
this is some great music.
Totally.
There was, I remember when I first got turned on to Farron, who Sue
Yes.
mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
She has a couple of love songs that are absolutely as good as any song I've ever heard. And, you know, it didn't matter to me. I've heard my phone keep going off. I don't know. It's telling me to take my meds.
We've reached critical amount of coolness. Yeah.
Hunter Davis used to come through that women's series, and she's just the cutest little thing you'd ever want to see. Hunter Davis is as pretty as the day is long, and she said, "You don't know how goddamn good it feels not to change the words to my song from she to he. I love this place because I don't have to change the gender in my song." And then this little old fella just fell in love with her. You could see the little old hearts coming right out of his eyes. And she ran over to the bar and she said, "Sharon, good God, go tell him that I'm as queer as a $2 bill. I don't want to hurt his feelings."
All these stories are why I wrote mine down in advance, because I couldn't possibly compete with this.
Smart man.
Yeah.
I'm done for the evening. Thank you so much. I appreciate each and every one of you. I appreciate everyone here. So how many of you think we should do this again? Absolutely.
If you all have stories you want to record, you can see Izzy. He's packing up, but he'll make an appointment for you. You can get a hold of me. I'll set you up with an appointment at WYSO with one of the Community Voices producers and all that. Donation box on the bar for Mick's expenses, and email address down here for Mick's author. See you guys on the Facebook. Love you.